Arnold and Byer's book, talking a bit about geography, when and where. And we'll be looking at some maps, seeing this. What events does the Old Testament describe? We're not going to go into this in detail now. It will be more later as a pick up in the course. But we start off in Genesis with the patriarchs and Israel's beginning, getting into Exodus through Deuteronomy, Moses, and Joshua. Then we have the kings, David, Solomon, and we already mentioned the exile. Coming back to the exile and restoration. But we'll look at that in a lot more detail. But first of all, looking at some of the regions, and again, sorry for the glare. You can see it better if I turn off the light. Some people are writing notes, and it's hard to do that. But here you can see the Mediterranean, the Red Sea. This is Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, but this is called Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates River. Babylon down here, Assyria up further toward the north. We'll be looking at some of these in a bit more detail. But that gives you a bit of an overview. And this whole area is kind of colored in this map, but this is called the Fertile Crescent, because you can see the rivers are flowing here. This is the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, which is really desert. Nothing much happens there. The Fertile Crescent, because where you've got water where people live, the trade routes going through there. Before we come back to some maps, I want to talk a little bit about writing as well, because the ancient Near East was the cradle of writing. It's probably the first place where writing developed. And the earliest writing, as far as we're able to tell, is written with what they called cuneiform. The first part of it in Latin means wedge or nail. So this is nail-shaped writing, because they would take a piece of clay, they would have a stylus, which is something like a pen, maybe a little bit longer, like your straw there maybe, only it would have a triangular end. It would be made out of wood of some kind, and you would make marks in the clay. And you can see some of the marks here, which are kind of nail-shaped. When they first ran across this, explorers there over the centuries have been finding these documents. They didn't realize it was writing. They just thought it was pictures being drawn. But it has been deciphered. It started out in Sumerian, would be the first language, and it started out as pictures. One sign is equal one word. They would call that pictographic language or sign language. And then it developed a bit more to make it a bit easier, because my art is even worse than my handwriting. So to be able to read, if I was drawing pictures of things, you'd have real trouble. So what they would do is they would have a picture sign and have the first syllable of that be, we'd use the sign for that sound rather than for a picture. For example, you might have a sign for something that begins with "la," but it wouldn't matter what the picture was, they would just use the first syllable. So you would have "li" and another symbol, the first syllable of another word, which is "gal." So we come up with our word "legal," written with two signs. Two syllables, two signs. The first language I mentioned is Sumerian. That was written pictographically, and this is called Akkadian. Those names aren't probably going to be on the quiz, though. It was a lot easier to write, because you have to draw pictures for everything. You could theoretically have thousands of symbols. This is easy. I'll pick this up over the next 700 different symbols here, different signs. Another pictographic language, and this would have been in Mesopotamia, what is now Iraq, and in that area. Egyptian also had pictographic language. This is hieroglyphics. You can recognize, I mean, not in great detail, but you can recognize some birds here. Snake. I don't read Egyptian, so. But anyway, again, pictographic, so you need about 2,500 signs for that. And then some people in the West came up with an interesting thing that they did, is they took just the first letter of a word, and they had an alphabet. And so all of a sudden now, instead of thousands or 700, there's something that we could even pick up. This is Hebrew. This is the archaic form of Hebrew. Only 22 signs. How many do we have in English? 26. So Hebrew's even easier than English. So I'm offering a Hebrew class online right now. You can still get into that if you want. But now we won't spend time here. But it's interesting that Hebrew characters were picked up by the Greeks, and Greek alphabet was picked up in English too. If you'd like, this is all of it. Hebrew reads from right to left, by the way. This is a sign of an ox originally, the horns. What happens if you rotate it 90 degrees? You've got your A. Rotate this one 180 degrees, and you've got a small B. Knock this one off. In Greek, move that around a bit. Let's find your delta, which is your D. So you know more than you do. But anyway, that was Hebrew, Aramaic, sister languages using the alphabet. And again, it's becoming easier and easier to write as time goes on. So originally, if you like, the Akkadian language, that cuneiform language, was the diplomatic language around the ancient Near East. Everybody had to learn, everybody who could read and write had to learn that. But most people couldn't read and write because you don't have time. If you're a farmer, you can't learn 700 signs. But all of a sudden, when you've got 22, it's more available. And so even though native speakers of Akkadian said, let's use the alphabet and use Aramaic, I already mentioned, as a diplomatic language. We'll use that for our diplomatic speech because it's a lot easier to read and write. And we have an example of this in one of the wall inscriptions, a drawing here. These are two scribes on an Assyrian palace wall. And you can see this fellow here is holding really a block of clay, and he's got a stylus, so he's making marks on it. So he's writing an Akkadian cuneiform. And what they would record is that they would go off on a battle. They would say, so many people were killed in the battle. They'd write it down. These are the different kinds of plants that we saw. Write that down. You might see pictures of a guy like this. The Assyrians, the ones who lived in Mesopotamia, a real He-Man, had a big full beard like this. This is a different kind of person. You can see he doesn't have the full beard. He might even be a eunuch, but he's writing differently. You notice he's holding what looks like a piece of paper, and he's holding what really is a pen, because he's writing in Aramaic. He's writing in cousin to Hebrew. Because this shows that there's a transition going on. You still have your official documents for the Akkadian Empire, Syrian Empire is Akkadian, but they're also for more common consumption. Periodically, too, we have a class in Akkadian at the seminary. So when the demand rises, you want to sign up. You've got to take Hebrew first. Keep it in mind. Keep it in mind. Going back to our maps. I mention these languages because there's some of the literature in the world of the Old Testament that impacts on the study of Genesis and Exodus, for example, that was written in Akkadian and some in Egyptian as well. You've got subregions here in Israel geographically. Now, one thing, when you see a map of Israel, I don't know if you've ever driven across the States, for example, you get the Rand McNally Atlas, and you pull out Idaho, and it's on a page of the map. You pull out Montana, it's also on a page of the map. But it takes you half an hour to go through Idaho. It takes you 2 days to go through Montana. Sometimes, I mean, they're not to scale necessarily. And so we think Israel, we think at least as big as Alaska. But I point here, from the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean Sea is about 45 miles. And it's only about 120 miles from the top of Israel down to the bottom. So on a globe, for example, Israel's name is usually written over in the Mediterranean because it's too small to put the name in. So theologically, historically, religiously, if you like, it's a big country, but it's fairly small geographically. And you've got several subregions. As you come in, what they call the coastland, the Philistine coast there. We have here Sharon, this is Haifa, by the way. I don't know if you've been to Israel. This is where Haifa is. The Sharon plain, Rose of Sharon, for example, it occurs in the Bible. That would be there. And then you have the hill country, Judean hills, which Jerusalem, for example, is in it. So this is steeper. Jerusalem is about 2,600 feet in elevation. So you go from sea level to 2,600 feet, if you like, in 40 miles. And then the next section here is called, of an Africa, it's called the Rift Valley. It goes down through what used to be Tanzania. Is it still Tanzania? I can't remember. Changed from Tanganyika to Tanzania or back and forth. Anyway, runs down to South Africa. Dead Sea is the lowest point on Earth. It's 1,400 feet below sea level. So you've got 2,000 some here, and then within 10 miles, and this makes you appreciate, for example, Jesus' parable when he says a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and he fell among thieves. He's really going down. It's a steep decline there. And then the other place where some events happened in our story will be in the Transjordanian highlands. Transjordan, meaning this is the Jordan River, cross Jordan, there are highlands here. And this again is a steep climb, some of them are cliffs, going up thousands of feet up above. You might see it even better. I have these different ones here. The coastal plains, Central Mountain Range, Jordan Rift Valley. But look at across, oh, it doesn't come through. Can you turn off the light just for a minute here? Still doesn't help. It's the wall is the problem. It's too reflective. Here's kind of a cross section here, where you're going up to the mountains, and then you have a really steep fall here down to the Jordan Valley, and then you go right up to the Transjordanian mountains. As I say here, 90 kilometers. Well, from there, it's even shorter from this section through here. Okay, thank you. This is a bit of the geography. This is one of the reasons why it's really neat if you can to actually go to Israel to get a feel of these things. Now, as they are now, highways are an important part of life. The main one, if you notice, the big one here, the interstate, if you like, it stays in the Fertile Crescent. It stays by water. That's where you want to travel. And so we have branches here in Damascus, which is, again, in the news. We have it going along the coast in what's called the Way of the Sea, or Via Maris. It's an Italian name for it, or sorry, Latin name for it. That's the shortest way between Egypt and Israel. And then over on the other side of the Jordan River, you have the King's Highway. Both of these are mentioned in the Bible. We'll be talking about some events in relationship with them. There's much less going through here. Again, this is desert. It's really hard to travel here. This is an aside. I don't know if you've ever watched Lawrence of Arabia, for example, the movie Lawrence of Arabia. He was the First World War. He was trying to get some people over here to fight on the side of the British. And so he was coming in to fight the Arab legions. This was Lawrence, who's a British soldier. And he surprised them by bringing his forces across here because they didn't think an army could do that because it was so dry. They were expecting them to come along in this direction. So those are the main roads. And if you notice, again, Israel is here. Its name's not in this map. But the major empires were the Assyrians and the Babylonians, the Egyptians and the Hittites, the people up here in Turkey. None of them liked each other. They always were fighting each other. So the Egyptians would go up here to fight against the Turks, and who would they walk over as they came? Go right over Israel. The Assyrians would come to fight against the Egyptians, walking over Israel in the other direction. So, I mean, if you're strong enough, you can set up a toll booth and collect toll from everybody that comes. And usually Israel wasn't, they said, oh, here they come again. So Israel's really in the crossfire here. We won't spend time on this. Again, this comes straight from the textbook. We're going to be looking more at the last half. The archaeological periods of the ancient Near East, especially in Israel, especially this earlier stuff, the Stone Age, Copper Stone Age, I really know nothing about. It was in this earlier period where we have writing developed. But we're going to be looking more down here, so I'll have a little bit larger slide of it. The Middle Bronze Age, as it's called, from 2000 to about 1550. This is the time of the patriarchs. This would be Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. So Israel was just getting born there, and they ended up down in Egypt. And then in the Late Bronze Age is the time of the judges, for example, for them coming out of Egyptian slavery and moving toward Israel, settling down in Israel, probably about 1200 BC. This is the same time we'll run across some other folks called the Philistines that were coming in. Israel was coming in from Transjordan, if you like, from the right, from the east, and the Philistines, the sea people they're called, were coming in from the Mediterranean side. They both wanted to live in the same place, so that's why in Judges we have a lot of fighting going on. Then we have the Iron Age, when Israel is settled in the land, and this is the time when, well, the judges are really more settling in here and consolidating their hold. This is also the time of, say, David and Solomon, the United Kingdom, when Israel and Judah were both together as one nation. And then when Solomon died, the kingdom split, where you have Israel and Judah, and that's in Iron Age 2. And that goes down to about 539 BC. I'll show you some of these on a map too, so you can see this. When this is the Assyrians, the Babylonians are controlled, and then finally the Persians come in. And this is the Persian period. Some of you probably in school took more in classical history. Anybody know what happened? Who was around 332 BC? Alexander the Great. That's when he came through here. So all of a sudden we're moving from the ancient Near Eastern realm to, if you like, the European realm. So he comes in and causes problems for the areas here. So this is the period then of the Old Testament. As you can see, it's about 2,000 years, or even more. If you look at Genesis, beginning, how far does it go back? Although the New Testament, it covers less than 100 years. So 2,000 years in 16 classes, that's why we've got a month. And I apologize for the color not coming too well here. Kingdom of Saul was in this particular area. Expanded under the time of David. He conquered, but he also made treaties, alliances with some of the outlying areas. So it went clear down here. And Solomon, as it says here, had some economic control even further abroad. But it's still a relatively small, you can see the scale here. It's not a big area. The Assyrians and the Babylonians, they were the ones that took over this whole area and were fighting with Egypt. But again, The Assyrians came through and were controlling the whole area in 722 BC. They captured Samaria, which is the capital of Israel in the north, took it into exile. That was the end of that 10 tribes. And then the Babylonians took control, and they finally took Judah into exile in 586 BC. And then we have, apologies for the color. I have something coming up that I hope we'll be able to see the colors a bit more. This is the Persian Empire. What do they call Persia now? What's the contemporary name for Persia? Iran. Iran. And it covered this whole area. This, by the way, shows you some insight into contemporary political situations. Iran has visions of reestablishing that. So, going back to where they were originally. If I get this to work. This is called a site called Maps of War. And it goes through, there's a bit of a glitch in the middle, but it goes through from 3000 BC to, well, this was 2006, so it's changed a little bit. But it, without sound, it's just going to show you what's going on in the area. And remember, this is Israel. The perspective will change a little bit. It'll be moving around, but you can see why Israel had to keep ducking. Get it to work. It's got a timeline running across the bottom. So again, these are the Hittites up in Turkey. David, Solomon, Saul. The Assyrians, again, coming in, fighting against the Egyptians, conquering them. Then the Babylonians coming in. These were the two exiles. And then the Persian Empire taking that whole area. There's Alexander the Great going clear over to India. And then the Romans. This is the New Testament period, so my history becomes a bit vague after that. So anyway, you just see it. More Greek influence. Persia again. That's what ISIS is calling itself, by the way. That's what they want. I'm not sure who the Seljuks are.
Turks.
Turks, okay. Now something goes on here, and it'll pick up again in a bit, but we've got the Ottoman Empire. Crusades, Saladin. Mongol Empire. So if you watch Marco Polo, this is what's going on there. There's the Ottoman Empire, Turks. The Brits and Portuguese and stuff involved there. 1948, Israel is founded, just that little bit, expanded. And that's the end here. See again where they have the different nations were formed. When I ran across that, I found it really fascinating to see what's going on. The U.S. is kind of boring. This is a bit shorter this time, so Tom, you can go ahead and click there. Any questions on geography?